6 Cuban military vessels attack U.S. Coast Guard. Destroyer answers with 12 minutes of devastation. November 2nd, 2025, 2:38 a.m., 67 miles east of Havana. A routine narcotics interdiction spiraled into the fiercest naval engagement in the Straits of Florida since the Cuban Missile Crisis. USS Carney and 2 Coast Guard cutters confronted Cuban Navy corvettes defending a billion-dollar drug convoy. Machine gun fire shredded the night. Anti-ship missiles streaked toward American warships. The boundary between counter-narcotics and full combat dissolved in gunfire and explosions. This wasn't planned escalation. This was spontaneous warfare, and it revealed truths both nations tried to hide. The operation launched 96 hours earlier. CIA signals intelligence intercepted unusual maritime traffic patterns. Cuban military vessels departing naval bases without standard protocols, meeting civilian cargo ships in international waters, escorting them through predetermined corridors. The pattern repeated 3 times in 2 weeks. Something had changed in Cuban government policy. Southcom analysts pieced together the picture. Cuba's economic collapse had reached critical levels. The regime needed hard currency. The cartels needed protected transit routes. A deal had been struck. Cuban Navy would escort high-value drug shipments through the straits. In exchange, the cartels would pay $50 million per convoy, state-sponsored trafficking on an industrial scale. The White House faced an impossible choice: ignore Cuban military protection of narcotics and watch billions in drugs flood American streets, or intercept and risk armed confrontation with a hostile nation's navy. The decision came from the Situation Room after 14 hours of debate. Intercept, document, engage if threatened. Establish precedent that military protection of trafficking will not be tolerated. USS Carney deployed from Naval Station Mayport. Arleigh Burke Flight 2A destroyer, 9,500 tons of advanced warship, Aegis Baseline 9 combat system, 96 vertical launch cells, AN SPY 1DV radar, the most sophisticated air defense destroyer in the Atlantic Fleet. Her mission was presence and deterrence. Her reality would be combat. 2 Coast Guard cutters joined the interdiction force, USCGC Thetis and USCGC Forward, both Legend-class national security cutters, 4,500 tons each, 57mm Bofors guns, Phalanx CIWS, MH-60 Jayhawk helicopters, advanced boarding teams. These weren't small patrol boats. These were capable warships disguised as law enforcement platforms. Tonight they'd need every weapon system. If this developing conflict scenario has you hooked, hit that subscribe button immediately, because this story goes places nobody expected. The narco convoy departed Cuban waters at 11:47 p.m. 4 cargo vessels in tight formation, each carrying 4,000 kilograms of cocaine. Combined street value $3.2 billion. Their manifests claimed agricultural exports to Mexico. Their actual cargo would supply every cocaine user in Florida for 8 months. The ships sailed under legitimate registry. They had proper documentation. Everything appeared legal except for the military escort surrounding them. 6 Cuban Navy corvettes formed a protective screen. POC-class patrol ships. Soviet-designed. 560 tons displacement. 30mm AK-630 close-in weapon systems. SAN-5 surface-to-air missiles. Anti-ship missiles on 4 vessels. Range 15 kilometers. These weren't ceremonial escorts. These were combat-ready warships with orders to defend the convoy against any interference. The Cuban naval commander had clear instructions from Havana. American forces could observe, but not intercept. Any attempt to board the cargo vessels would be treated as an act of war. The corvettes had authorization to engage. Fire warning shots. Escalate to lethal force if Americans didn't withdraw. The regime believed the U.S. wouldn't risk military confrontation over drug interdiction. They calculated wrong. Carney's AN SPY 1D radar acquired the convoy at 38 miles. 11 contacts total. 4 cargo vessels. 6 military escorts. Formation speed 12 knots. The destroyer's Combat Information Center analyzed the tactical picture. This wasn't typical smuggling. This was military protection of criminal enterprise. The captain transmitted situation reports to Southcom. He received acknowledgement and a single order. Monitor. Prepare to intercept cargo vessels if opportunity presents. Defend yourself if attacked. At 1:52 a.m., the Coast Guard cutters broke from their patrol station. They accelerated to 25 knots on an intercept vector. Their mission was classic interdiction. Approach the cargo vessels, issue commands, attempt boarding. The Cuban corvettes immediately responded. They increased speed, positioned themselves between the Coast Guard cutters and the cargo ships. Weapon systems went active. Fire control radars energized. The Cubans were establishing a defensive perimeter. USCGC Thetis led the approach. At 3,000 yards, her searchlights illuminated the lead cargo vessel. Loudspeakers transmitted in Spanish and English. United States Coast Guard conducting lawful maritime interdiction. All vessels heave to and prepare for inspection under international narcotics trafficking protocols. The cargo vessels maintained course and speed. They ignored the commands completely. The Cuban corvettes moved to blocking positions, 2 positioned directly ahead of Thetis, 4 others flanking at 2,500 yards. Their 30mm guns tracked the American cutters. The message was clear. Approach further, and we fire. Thetis held position. Her captain transmitted to Carney. Hostile military forces preventing lawful interdiction, requesting guidance. What's your tactical assessment? Type A for immediate withdrawal to avoid conflict. Type B for continued pressure despite military threats. The answer came from USS Carney. Continue approach. Exercise right of visit and search on suspected trafficking vessels. Carney will provide overwatch and support. The destroyer moved to 6,000 yards from the convoy. Her Aegis system tracked all 6 Cuban corvettes simultaneously. Fire control solutions calculated for every vessel. The Mk-45 5-inch gun trained on the nearest Cuban ship. Carney wasn't threatening, she was ready. At 2:31 a.m., USCGC Forward attempted to maneuver around the Cuban blocking position. She accelerated to 28 knots, altered course to approach the cargo vessels from the eastern vector. 2 Cuban corvettes immediately pursued. They matched Forward's speed, maintained blocking positions. At 1,200 yards, the lead Cuban corvette transmitted warning. United States vessel, you are interfering with legitimate commercial traffic under Cuban naval protection. Withdraw immediately, or face defensive action. Forward's commanding officer made the call. These cargo vessels are suspected drug traffickers. Cuba has no authority to interfere with international anti-trafficking operations. Continuing approach. The Cuban corvette's response was instant. Her 30mm AK-630 opened fire, not at Forward. At the water 80 yards ahead of her bow. Warning shots. The message was escalating from words to weapons. Forward stopped engines. Her crew went to battle stations. The 57mm Bofors gun traversed toward the Cuban vessel, but the rules of engagement were restrictive. Warning shots didn't constitute hostile action. The Americans needed direct fire on U.S. vessels before they could respond. Forward held position, weapons ready, waiting. USS Carney's captain watched the situation deteriorate. Cuban military forces using weapons to interfere with lawful operations. American vessels unable to complete their mission. The standoff couldn't continue. He ordered Carney to close distance. The destroyer accelerated. 6,000 yards became 4,000 yards. Her Mk-45 gun remained trained on Cuban vessels. The presence of a 9,500-ton destroyer changed the tactical equation immediately. The Cuban convoy commander saw Carney approaching. He transmitted on all frequencies. American destroyer, you are approaching Cuban naval vessels conducting legitimate escort operations. This is your final warning. Maintain distance or we will defend our vessels. Carney's captain responded with facts. Cuban vessels, you are protecting suspected drug trafficking in international waters. The United States is exercising lawful interdiction authority. Stand aside or be held accountable for obstruction. At exactly 2:38 a.m., the Cuban commander made his fatal decision. He ordered all corvettes to engage the American vessels, not to sink them, but to drive them away with overwhelming firepower. 6 30mm weapon systems opened fire simultaneously. Tracers arced across dark water from multiple directions. Shells struck the ocean around both Coast Guard cutters. Some rounds hit. Metal tore, equipment shattered. USCGC Thetis took 4 direct hits on her superstructure. No casualties, but significant damage. Forward took 7 hits along her port side. 1 sailor wounded by shrapnel. The Cubans had just attacked United States Coast Guard vessels. The rules of engagement transformed instantly. Return fire authorized. All Cuban military vessels designated hostile. USS Carney had authority to engage with all weapon systems. Show your support for this detailed combat reconstruction by hitting that like button right now. Thetis and Forward returned fire within 3 seconds. Both 57mm Bofors guns engaged the nearest Cuban corvettes. Programmable ammunition, 3-round bursts. The first Cuban corvette took 6 57mm shells across her bridge and forward gun mount. The second corvette's AK-630 was destroyed by direct hit. Both Cuban vessels broke off immediately, engines smoking, listing, withdrawing from the engagement. But 4 Cuban corvettes remained combat effective, and they escalated. 2 corvettes launched anti-ship missiles, Soviet-designed SSN-2 Styx derivatives, active radar seekers, 5 113-kilogram warheads, speed Mach 0.9, range 15 kilometers. Both missiles targeted USS Carney. The Cuban commander had decided to eliminate the American destroyer. Fatal miscalculation. Carney's Aegis system detected both missile launches instantly. Threat assessment computed in milliseconds. 2 inbound anti-ship missiles. Time to impact 82 seconds. The destroyer's automated defense systems engaged without human input. This was exactly what Aegis was designed for. 2 SM-2 Standard missiles launched from vertical cells. Solid rocket motors ignited. The interceptors climbed to 8,000 feet and acquired their targets. The first SM-2 struck an incoming Styx at 4 miles from Carney. The warhead detonated. The Cuban missile disintegrated. Debris scattered across the ocean. The second SM-2 intercepted at 2.8 miles. Perfect kill. Both Cuban missiles destroyed before threatening the destroyer. Aegis had performed flawlessly. Now Carney would respond. At 2:40 a.m., 2 minutes after the Cubans opened fire, Carney launched 4 RGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles. The canisters erupted in sequence. 4 missiles roared into the night on pillars of flame. They climbed to cruise altitude. Active seekers went hot at 10 miles. Each missile acquired a separate Cuban corvette. Terminal approach at 537 miles per hour. Wave-skimming flight profiles. The Cubans had no defense against weapons this advanced. The first Harpoon struck a Cuban corvette amidships at 2:41 a.m. The 488-pound warhead punched through the thin hull and detonated inside. The corvette exploded from internal pressure. Fire erupted through every opening. She sank in under 90 seconds. The second Harpoon hit its target's engine compartment. The blast broke the corvette's back. She folded and went down within 2 minutes. The third and fourth Harpoons engaged the corvettes that had launched missiles at Carney. Both hits were catastrophic. One corvette disintegrated completely. The other capsized and sank burning. Within 90 seconds, 4 Cuban Navy corvettes had been destroyed by weapons they couldn't evade or intercept. What would you have done commanding the Cuban forces at this point? Continue fighting or surrender? Drop your assessment in the comments. 2 Cuban corvettes remained. Both had been damaged by Coast Guard gunfire. Both were withdrawing at maximum speed toward Cuban territorial waters, 18 miles south. They believed if they could reach the 12-mile limit, international law would protect them. Carney's captain had different plans. The Mk-45 5-inch gun had been tracking both corvettes throughout the engagement. At 2:43 a.m., the gun opened fire. 20 rounds per minute. High explosive shells. The first corvette took 3 hits. Her bridge exploded. Fires erupted. She lost steering. The second corvette tried evasive maneuvers. The gun adjusted automatically. 5 shells struck her hull. She stopped dead in the water. Both corvettes transmitted surrender within 30 seconds. At 2:50 a.m., 12 minutes after first shots fired, the engagement ended. 6 Cuban Navy corvettes neutralized. 4 sunk. 2 disabled and surrendering. 0 American vessels lost, 1 sailor wounded, minor damage to 2 Coast Guard cutters. The narco convoy's 4 cargo vessels were dead in the water. Crews had abandoned ship in lifeboats during the firefight. Coast Guard boarding teams would secure them unopposed. The aftermath played out across diplomatic channels immediately. Cuba claimed unprovoked American aggression. They declared the sinking of 4 naval vessels an act of war. They demanded UN Security Council intervention. They threatened retaliation. But the evidence destroyed their narrative completely. USS Carney's combat systems had recorded everything. The Cuban corvettes firing first, the anti-ship missiles launching toward American vessels. Every hostile action documented with timestamps and video. The U.S. released edited footage within 8 hours. The world saw Cuban military vessels attacking American Coast Guard, saw missiles launched at a destroyer, saw legitimate self-defense response. Cuba's propaganda collapsed under factual evidence. This tactical blow-by-blow analysis required extensive research and expert consultation. Support our channel with a thumbs up if you found this valuable. The cargo inspection confirmed intelligence assessments. 16,200 kilograms of pure cocaine distributed across 4 vessels. Street value $3.2 billion, plus documentation proving Cuban government involvement. Payment schedules. Escort coordination orders. Official naval communications authorizing convoy protection. The evidence was irrefutable. Cuba's regime had weaponized their navy for cartel profit. International response was swift. The UN condemned Cuba's use of military forces to protect drug trafficking. The Organization of American States suspended Cuba's observer status. Additional sanctions targeted Cuban officials involved in narcotics cooperation. The regime's desperate gamble for cartel money had cost them 4 warships and international credibility. The tactical lesson spread through naval warfare doctrine immediately. Coast Guard cutters can operate in combat environments with proper support. Destroyers provide overwhelming firepower advantage against small combatants. Aegis missile defense works perfectly against anti-ship threats. Integration between law enforcement and military forces creates unstoppable capability. July 9th became required study material at every naval institution. For Carney's crew and the Coast Guardsmen aboard Thetis and Forward, the night was transformative. They'd been attacked by a hostile nation's navy. They'd defended themselves perfectly. They'd destroyed 4 enemy warships and disabled 2 more. They'd protected each other and completed their mission. This was what they existed for, what they'd trained for, and they'd executed flawlessly under pressure that would crush unprepared forces. The strategic implications extended far beyond the Caribbean. Russia watched one of their Corvette designs get annihilated by American missiles. China studied how quickly Aegis responded to anti-ship missile threats. Iran noted that attacking U.S. naval forces results in overwhelming retaliation. Every adversary learned the same lesson. American destroyers don't bluff. They destroy. Cuba's navy never recovered from July 9th. Losing 4 corvettes in 12 minutes devastated their fleet capability. Morale collapsed. Training emphasized avoiding American forces. The regime quietly ended all cartel cooperation. The economic benefits weren't worth losing warships to Harpoon missiles. One engagement had reset Cuban naval policy completely. Was this engagement proof that military protection of drug trafficking will always fail against U.S. forces? Should America maintain permanent destroyer presence in the Straits of Florida? Share your strategic opinion below. American regional allies watched the engagement with satisfaction. If Cuba's military couldn't protect traffickers against U.S. forces, then partnership with America meant real security. Bahamas, Jamaica, Dominican Republic all saw validation that American naval protection works when tested. The strategic balance in the Caribbean shifted permanently in one 12-minute firefight. The cartels lost $3.2 billion in product, plus their Cuban protection arrangement. The Sinaloa and Gulf organizations had paid $150 million for 3 promised convoy escorts. They'd received 1 convoy and 4 sunken corvettes. The remaining money became leverage for Cuban regime survival. The cartels demanded refunds. Cuba couldn't pay. The criminal alliance collapsed in mutual accusations and threats. Training modifications implemented across the fleet immediately. Coast Guard cutters received enhanced defensive systems, better damage control equipment, improved medical capabilities. They were law enforcement vessels, but they operated in environments where hostile military forces might engage them. July 9th proved that reality required preparation. For the one wounded sailor, recovery took 6 weeks. He returned to full duty with a Purple Heart and stories nobody outside classified briefings would believe. He'd been wounded by a Cuban Navy corvette. His ship had helped sink 4 enemy vessels. His service had been tested in actual combat. That experience defined his career and his life. The diplomatic aftermath took months to resolve. Cuba eventually acknowledged their vessels fired first. They claimed justified defense of commercial shipping. The U.S. presented overwhelming evidence of drug trafficking and state sponsorship. Cuba's position became untenable. They withdrew their protests, accepted responsibility, quietly paid compensation to families of Cuban sailors killed in the engagement. This is what modern naval warfare looks like. Not carrier battles or submarine hunts, but confrontations between law enforcement and corrupt militaries. Drug interdiction escalating to missile combat. Coast Guard cutters fighting alongside destroyers. Real weapons, real casualties, real victory for forces with superior technology and training. To every nation considering military protection for criminal enterprises, that July night delivered an eternal warning. The U.S. Navy will engage, will destroy, will establish that no amount of corruption justifies attacking American forces. Challenge that reality and watch your warships sink in minutes while the world documents your defeat. Your commentary drives what we cover. Drop your analysis of this engagement below. Subscribe and hit notifications so you never miss our military operation breakdowns. Share this with anyone questioning whether American naval power translates to real combat effectiveness. The Straits of Florida remember July 9, 2025, the night Cuba chose to fight for cartel money. The morning 12 minutes destroyed 4 warships and a regime's credibility. The engagement proving American dominance isn't negotiable, isn't debatable, isn't challenged without devastating consequences. Freedom demands defenders who engage when attacked. Security requires technology that makes enemy weapons obsolete. Justice needs forces executing perfectly under fire. This was all of that. This was 12 minutes changing everything. This was Carney. This was the U.S. Navy. This was absolute dominance.